Welcome, everyone, and hello. My name is Connie LaRoe, and I am your host for today. I'm filling in for Melanie Barnett. And as John mentioned, this is the Ross Executive Education Seminar Series, and our topic today is Leading Teams to the Future, and we have Ross faculty member Paula Caproni. She is one of our most requested faculty members. She's been with Executive Education and Ross for many years. She teaches in our custom programs all around the world. She teaches in the Leading High Performing Teams Open Enrollment Program, one of our public programs. That one is actually coming up here in May. So she teaches there. She does programs for our Speakers Bureau for clients around the world. She also is an executive coach, so she coaches executives and executive teams. And we are just very, very pleased to have her here. She actually has a new book also. It's called The Secrets of Success. And she is just a wonderful, wonderful faculty member, and we're so pleased to have her with us here today. So with that, Paula, I am going to turn it over to you.
All right. Well, first, I want to welcome you all. I asked John, where is everybody coming, joining us from? And it's all over the world. Some alums, some from our MBA program, some from our executive education program. We have over 755 people registered today. So I'm just very excited about this. Some places our friends joining us are from. We've got India, certainly North America, South America. We've got some people from India. We've got Riyadh, where I've done some work. So I'm hoping, I know that you've signed in. Maybe it's somebody I know, so welcome. Also Aruba, and if you ever want a custom program in Aruba, sign me up. So welcome, everybody. We also have people from all different industries and all different kinds of work, from the medical school to the Department of Justice to all different types of organizations, large or small. And that's a point I want to make before we start into the content, is that the materials that are presented here today, the research on high-performing teams, is useful. It's full of practical advice, regardless of your nationality, regardless of the kind of organization, regardless of what role you play in the organization, whether it's engineering or HR or R&D, whatever it is, or whether you're an emergency room physician, right? Whether you're a nurse, it's useful for everybody, because I strongly believe in the words that the late Mr. Morita, the co-founder of Sony, said, that in his travels all over the world, he learned that people are 95% the same and 5% different. If you've taken a program with me before, you've heard this before. I believe this in my heart of hearts. As Connie says, I've traveled a lot. It's because we're all human, regardless of our culture, nationality, gender, religion, race, whatever it is, we are the same species. And we have the same instincts, the same general goals and fears. So this program, in the next 45 minutes or so, we'll talk about some of the most general themes and characteristics that team leaders should know about. So let's get started with this. We are at a university, and one thing I like to do is start you off with a quiz. And so this is where John is going to come in and do a couple polls. Let's see how similar and different we are around the world. Regardless of where you are, if you put several smart people in a team, they will act smart. True or false? Okay, John, let's see what we've got so far. Okay, yes, it's false. No matter what country you're from, just think about it. You look at your organizations, you might look at your government, you might look, you think, what are they thinking? Regardless of where you're from. Smart people, when you put them in a team, unless you have a really good process, and you will learn this by the end of this time together, you will see why this is an important quiz question. If you put smart people in a team and you have a really bad process, or even a mediocre process, they're not going to act very smart. So that's number one. Number two, People are rational decision makers all around the world. What do you say? True or false? Okay, let's see what the results are. Some people may still be finishing it. Right, that's good. There is, some of you may be economists or you went to school and you learned economics. Usually it's the traditional economics. When you learn about leadership, including high-performing teams, you really want to look at the research of behavioral economists. These are people who assume that we're human, that we're what's called boundedly rational. We try to make good decisions, we try to do the right thing, but we fall short unless we have a really good process for decision making. That's a key point. We can help, we will always be irrational. We will never get rid of our biases because we're human. And these biases used to serve us well, used to serve our species well, just not so much now. If you have a good process, you can manage those biases. Number 3, let's close this one. Number 3, the team leader's personality. Your personality as a team leader will strongly predict effective team performance. True or false? Okay, John, that'll be, well, let's see what people have so far. Thank you. Trick question. It is a university, we like trick questions. No. What you're going to learn today is that design, process, structure will override personality. Unless you're a horrible, horrible human being, if you're a horrible human being, yeah, then that's going to affect the team. But most of us are just good people trying to do the best we can, and we're boundedly rational. Whether I'm a big picture person or detailed person, an extrovert or an introvert, if I have a good process in place for my team, that will not have a big impact on the team. The team's process you put in place, and you can do that regardless of your personality, will override your personality. That's a key takeaway here. It's a key takeaway in the longer high-performing teams program. It's good to know your style, strengths, weaknesses, values, but process overrides personality. Okay, so that was your first quiz. You got 2 out of 3, pretty right. So here's where we're going. Many of you have gone on tours where you go into a city and you're on vacation and you take a bus and you go around the city in about an hour. That's what we're doing today. It's your tour bus version of high-performing teams. I'm giving you the highlights. And we're going to cover 4 things. One is the context. What kinds of problems are your teams facing these days? Some are routine, many not routine. Some complicated, some complex, and we'll talk about what the difference is. We'll set the context. Then here's your model. Here's your high-level model. Here's where design overrides personality. What are the 4 roles you need to play as a leader in order to increase the chance that your team is going to get really good results and sometimes extraordinary results? So context, roles. Then you have to manage your time as a leader. There's something called the 60-30-10 rule. I'm going to tell you what that is. That's where you allocate your time and why that matters. And the last thing we'll do is what's the #1 predictor of team success? The top 3 don't matter at all if you don't have this. That's where we're going. So for context, you may have heard the language of VUCA. VUCA means volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Much like the world we live in, and many of you, most of you, are trying to make decisions in this complex, unpredictable, volatile, ambiguous world, right? And that directly affects your work. So one thing we know is this is not going to go away. The world is going to continue to be complex, more and more complex. We need to develop our teams, develop our leadership skills so we can address this complexity. And there are two parts to this. One is we can't really predict the future. We can forecast, but things are going to surprise us. But we can, it's good to try so that we can be more prepared, but we can never be 100% prepared. So we can't completely predict the future, and we have more wicked problems. And I'll explain what a wicked versus a tame problem is. This all matters for understanding the context in which your team works. So predicting the future. This is, I remember decades ago, and it was from Time or Newsweek. I was reading about this physician. This is for our medical people who are here, but a physician who's addressing a class of graduating physicians. And the physician says, I have some bad news and I have some worse news for you. The bad news is half of what you've learned here is not true. The worst news is we don't even know which half. That's a VUCA world, right? We're making assumptions, many of which aren't true, but we're doing the best we can based on our perspective and where we come from. So for predictions, let's look at some predictions of some extremely smart, successful people. There's no chance. Steve Ballmer, former Microsoft CEO, in 2007 said there's no chance that the iPhone is going to get any significant market share. Smart guy, had a lot of information. Remote shopping, while entirely feasible, will flop. That was in the 1960s. And here's the reason they said it would flop. Because women, we like to get out of the house, like to handle the merchandise, and we like to be able to change our minds. And I think, wow, they really got me then. So remote shopping will flop. Spam will be a thing of the past in 2 years' time, Bill Gates. And the last one, very relevant, the time has come, the time has come to close the book on infectious diseases. We've basically wiped out infection in the United States. So those are some predictions of some very smart people. And I don't say this to say they're foolish in any way. There were reasons they came to those assumptions. They did their research, just as we do our research. So we can't entirely predict the future. The next thing, as a leader, you need to keep in mind, for most of you here today, you're going to have to help your team address what are called wicked problems. So tame wicked, and wicked does not mean bad, particularly for people who don't come from the US. You hear wicked and you think it's bad. We're using wicked the way people in the Northeast of the United States use it. If you come from Maine or Massachusetts, wicked means really good. You see someone's coat and you say, that's a wicked coat. Those are wicked slippers. So wicked could mean horrible, but could also just mean extremely complex opportunities. So here's the difference. A tame problem, this is out of the research and strategy. A tame problem is well defined. And I'm going to go into more detail. So you can articulate very clearly a problem statement, and you know what success will look like, and you can go from A to B to C to D in order to solve that problem. It's sequential. You can get it. You can find information on how to define the problem and how to solve it. That's tame. A wicked problem is hard to define. It's complex. Okay? Basically, it means you try to solve something. If you don't even get agreement on how to define the problem. Different people have different perspectives based on who they are, where they're from, what the problem is, if there's even a problem. It's really hard to measure success. If you solve the problem over here, there are several unintended consequences that pop up over here. It's never completely solved. And it really doesn't depend on best practices. In this case, your teams, there are some best practices. There have to be innovative all the time, testing out solutions, experimenting. In more detail, your tame problem, again, there's clear agreement, and you have some of these. There's a gap between A and B. We all agree what success should look like. There's no politics involved. All cultures, all nationalities agree on the same thing. We see the world in that way, in the same way. We can measure success. We will know when we've succeeded. We have the data we need. It's clear, it's unambiguous, and it can be modeled. This means that if there's a problem in your company, right, you can call me or contact me and say, Paula, how did you solve that problem? And the problem that I solved in my company will work for yours. So it's a tame problem. Imagine, for example, it doesn't mean easy. It can be complicated, but complicated can mean there's an answer. Imagine, I know in the US, in Florida a few years ago, during peak traffic time around 5 o'clock in the evening, people are driving, a bridge was just built. Right after it was built, it crashed. It killed several people in the middle of high traffic time. Horrendous. But it's a tame problem. We all agree bridges shouldn't fall. There is a solution somewhere. We can identify what happened. And as soon as we identify what happened to that bridge, we can get the information out there and say, don't do that again. This is what happened. So it's a best practice for avoiding bridges falling in the future. Complicated, horrendous in this case, but tame. A wicked problem, there's social complexity. And this means there are multiple stakeholders, they have different opinions on the problem statement or whether there's a problem at all. Criteria for success are debatable. There's never right or wrong. There are often moral dilemmas. Not everybody's going to benefit from your solution, only better and worse, and you never completely solve it. Again, as I said before, you solve the problem over here, more problems come up over here. You will not have all the information you need, and this problem is unique to your situation. You can't say this happened and this hospital solves the problem this way. They've got an emergency room routine or system. We can't just apply it to ours because our state, our nation, the problems we have are unique. So it's catch me if you can. You're always chasing it. So an example, those of you in the US know this, maybe other countries. In the US, we have fairs in the summer where families go and they play games and they go on rides. One game is whack-a-mole. So this is a wicked problem. It's like whack-a-mole. And you see the woman with a bat. She is going to hit that mole. And you try to see, every time you hit one mole, another one or two come up. So you're always hitting the mole. So a wicked problem is something like a whack-a-mole problem. You are going to have more of those. You already do over time. You will still have tame ones, but you have to prepare your team for the wicked problems. So here is a universal. This is regardless of who you are, where you are, what kind of organization, whether it's engineering, HR, R&D, whatever your role is. Here is the theory. Here is the best practice. This is a huge takeaway. And this is why process overrides personality. Rather than attempting to manage your group on the spot, you are better spending your time creating the context, designing the context in which your team works so that it increases the possibility that your teams will succeed. So you create the design, and then within the box, within that context, that design, you leave the team room to develop their own strategies for solving the problem. They're often closer to the problem. They've got to adapt quickly. You can't micromanage a team when there are wicked problems. That's a huge takeaway. Design overrides personality. So how do the most effective team leaders spend their time? I promised you that I would tell you how they do. One is the biggest part of this is, if you see this little triangle there, diagram, 60% of your time is in supporting the team's context. And that would be a compelling purpose. Why do they even do the work? Even if it gets boring, hard, what's the greater good? Who do they help? Clear, unambiguous direction. This process, data-driven processes, so you can make sure people are aligned in that direction that supports that purpose. And then enabling relationships. And we'll talk about what each of these are. And again, I'm just giving you the high level. So you first have to do the design work. Then on a team, you want to get the team off to a good start. If you already have, most of you already have teams in process, you might want to go back to this and say, do the teams have what they need to do their work? And we'll talk a bit about each of these. And again, we're doing high level. This is the tour bus version. And then here's where your personality comes in. Here's where your relationship skills come in. Then use 10% of your time is coaching and developing the team, motivating people. It's connecting your team to people outside your team. It's building high performing teams. It's talent management. It's helping people learn and grow on the job. It's all that relationship work. But you can't do that work well until you've done, your team's off to a good start and you've designed the context in which the team works. I promised you the roles that you must play. You as a team leader, there are 4 roles, regardless of your personality. And one thing we know is that you can learn how to do any of these roles, right? If we put our mind to it, we can learn how to do any of this, regardless of where our strengths are. And this is where it's good to know what your strengths and weaknesses are. You know, we have assessments. You can take assessments that will give you insight as to which of these roles tend to be your strengths and weaknesses. And then you say, okay, I'm going to be really good with, you know, and I'll talk about these more as a visionary, but I can refine my skills and do that even better so that I can be awesome. And maybe I'm not as good as a systems designer, data-driven decisions. I can learn how to do that. So here are the 4 roles. The visionary, the order matters. And I'll explain why the order matters. All of these matter all of the time. But for you now, you need to ask yourself right now in this program, you know, have you given your teams a clear, inspiring, compelling vision? Why do they even do the work they do? Right? That's the big picture you. Who do we help in our job, in our roles, in our organization? That's the number 1 role you have. Then once you know the why of the work, the greater good, then you take on the strategic director role and say, okay, so now we're looking at bottom line results. In order for us to survive so we can achieve that grand vision, what results do we need to focus on? And this usually means 3 to 5. This is not 100, 1,000 results. That's over in this red system designer area. These are the 3 measures that matter most. Is it safety? Is it competitiveness? Is it customer service? Is it being able to get grants to do your work? You decide for your organization in your context what those bottom line results are, the big picture bottom line results that will help your organization survive. So now you've got your vision, you've got the bottom line results, and I'm going to talk about each of these in a little more detail. Then you go into this red area, which is systems designer. This is where you design, you use data-driven decisions. This is your project management. This is where everybody, regardless of where you are, excuse me, in the organization, this is where you're aligning everybody's work toward those 3 to 5 key performance indicators that matter most in the organization. Everybody's job should be linked and measured to that. Not in a micromanaging way, but we do need to have what they're called our guardrails. These are the guardrails that make sure in our journey we're headed in the same direction and we can measure our progress. Then relationships kick in. Now, relationships you're doing from the start. When we end this, you'll see relationships are central to all of this. But in this framework, your role as a relationship builder, it depends on your other 3 roles. If I'm relationship manager means I'm going to coach my employees. I can't really do a great job of coaching them unless they each have performance metrics, unless they know what they're supposed to be doing. I can't motivate people unless I can articulate clearly, unless they can say, this is the vision, this is who I help. This is why I come to work every day. This is why I leave my kids, right? This is why I stick with things even when they're not exciting, because there's a greater good here. So this has to do with building relationships that get results, from coaching to leading teams, to connecting across teams, to using influence, to developing your team's network. Those are the 4 roles. And I realize I'm giving you a lot of information. This is the tour, but this is the big picture version of this. So with each of these, I'm just going to give you 1 or 2 examples. For the creative visionary, they're the 3 CEOs. You've got Bill Gates, Steve Ballmer, and the current one in the middle, Satya Nadella. So look at how the vision has changed with each CEO. And maybe they made sense at the time. A computer on every desk in every home. Not worldwide, not everybody, but we pretty much take these for granted now, from anybody who's at this program, at least. And again, I'm aware that not everybody has access to these resources. That would be a wicked problem that we would want to solve. So a computer on every desk and in every home. Then along comes Steve Ballmer, and his is a lot more words, right? To create a family of devices and services for individuals and businesses that empower people around the globe and at home, at work, and on the go for the activities they value most. Pretty wordy. That's a hard. It's different than a computer on every desk. You know, it's wordier. Now look at Satya Nadella's. This is the current CEO. To empower every person and every organization on the planet to do more. So if I'm working for Microsoft, and maybe we have people here from Microsoft. If I'm working for Microsoft, I should know that in every single day, every single project, I should be saying to myself, am I helping people do more? Whoever they are, wherever they are, in whatever way we can help. Where this comes from, and this is where the personal matters. Satya Nadella has, I believe, 3 children. His firstborn, his son, Zane, and you can learn more about this if you want to see it online. There are some nice videos of him with his wife and his Zane, his child. I don't know about all 3. But Zane was born with cerebral palsy, very, very severe. And because of that, his life, his wife's life, has been very, very much devoted to helping his child do more, to have the best life possible. And that very much influenced the mission, the vision for Microsoft. And in fact, he puts his personal vision to work, and Microsoft does, because it's not just an instrumental vision. It's meant to change the world. And a really good vision does. It helps people. It's meant to change the world in some way. And I'm not going to show you this video, but you can find this. If you go online and look for Microsoft's Everything You Need to Know About Inclusive Design in 4 minutes. It's a 3 to 4 minute animated video. One of the participants in an executive education course that I was teaching, they were there from Microsoft, said, oh, you've got to see this. It's great. I saw it. It's great. And it's an animated video about how to use inclusive design. It's motivating. It's useful. But then if you go online, if you want to do this more about inclusive design in your organization, they give away for free a whole toolkit for using inclusive design in your organization. So the vision goes beyond just bottom line results. It's meant to change the world. So you want to be asking yourself now, is the vision for the team, and your vision for your team might be slightly different, yet connected to the organization's vision. Is your vision clear? Is it compelling? Is it easy to remember? Is it what we call sticky? Which means everybody remembers it and they act on it. They understand it, they remember it, and they act on it. That's something you can walk away with from today. So we're moving on, again, tour bus version. Strategic director, bottom line results. Once you have your vision, and if you don't have it, that's what you want to work on. There's something called, for those of you who are from the military, I know this is the language of the US military. I don't know if it's the same language in other countries, but there's something called commander's intent. And if we were in a classroom, I'd find somebody from the military and say, explain what that is, but I'll explain it to you. What commander's intent means, it assumes that you can have the best laid plan, best laid strategy, but when you're on the field, in the moment, anything could happen, and you have to be able to adjust immediately. That's agility, organizational agility. You can't stick to the initial strategy. You can't stick to the plan. And you, as a leader, may not be there with your teams to help them figure it out. They have to figure out what to do. So a commander's intent, it is a one easy to understand short statement, regular, in your regular language, not complicated language, that says this is what success looks like. We will have, success will be, we will have fewer or no errors in our team, whatever it is. This is what we'll be able to measure that. It's a measurable success. It's a simple and clear picture of what success will look like. It is not a big plan. It's not a lot of documents. It's simple, clear picture of what success will look like. When this is over, this is what success will look like. We recognize that unpredictability is normal. Things can happen that we may not even anticipate. And the point is, it empowers every employee to do what they need to do in the moment without having to check with you, check the documents. It says, okay, we've got a word that's overused right now, but it makes sense because we've got to pivot. We use that a lot in the US. We've got to pivot. And your employees have to be ready to pivot. They're on the phone call with a potential or an existing customer. Things start going a different direction. They've got to be ready. The script isn't going to work. So that's your commander's intent. You've got your clear vision, empowering, engaging, inspiring vision. You've got your very clear commander's intent that says, this is what success will look like. And you need to figure out for your teams, what is your commander's intent? And of course, there are more steps to do this. If we had a longer period of time together, we'd say, okay, for a vision, here's how you craft your vision. Here's how you craft a message that sticks. Here are some examples of organizational visions. For commander's intent, we would talk about, you would take time, you'd say, let's write down your commander's intent and share it with other people. And they say, yeah, that's clear. No, it's not. Yes, I'm inspired. No, I'm not. So you need, all of these take time to do, but at least you have to do it. So you've got your visionary, your bottom line results strategist. Now you've got your systems designer. This is the role you play when you want to put up guardrails so that we're all headed in the same direction. And we all know, because we have measurable performance metrics, I know if I'm making progress or not. I know I should spend more time here, not time over here. I know when I'm wasting time on things that don't matter. So now you have to put in the design, the guardrails. Remember, design overrides personality. One area that we focus a lot on is decision. Decision making is in this red systems process area. And as a team leader, you are no longer a decision maker. Let that sink in. You're no longer a decision maker. You are a decision manager. You manage the process, the guardrails, through which your team makes decisions. They learn clear, systematic, data-driven processes for making decisions. If we were face-to-face, whether it's on a Zoom call or in a classroom setting or in your organization, I would ask you, and if you've taken programs with me before, I'd say, how many people here have a systematic process for making decisions? Most people don't. And think about how important our decisions are in our organizations. Often it's people who sit around the table talking. And some people dominate the conversation. We're full of biases. We're tired. I'm going to give you an example later of what can happen when that happens. If you do have a systematic decision-making process already, either you, because you're you and your team, or your organization does, compliments to you. Most people would say we don't, even in these really critical decisions. So here's why we need a process. Here's your one-page summary of behavioral economics. This is from the research of Nobel Prize-winning behavioral economist Daniel Kahneman and several colleagues. No one makes these up by themselves. But how we really make decisions, he says there's system 1 and system 2 thinking. And it's simplifying the brain, that we're more complex, but it helps us understand. System 1 thinking is what we do most of the time. We spend most of our time making decisions automatically without thinking. And that's why I have your tying your shoe. You know, we all, if you tie shoe, you know, there's things that we do every day that we just don't even think about. They're fast, they're automatic, they take no effort. In the work we do, sometimes they're technical skills, right? Sometimes they have to be automatic. We can't think about everything, every decision that we face every day. We'd be paralyzed. So our instinct, our survival instinct, and we're all the same, right? People are 95% the same, is to simplify the world and put much of our decision making on automatic. And we use past experience. I've done this 10 times, you know, 10 for 10 years, I'll do it the same way. Stereotypes, if it's this type of customer, I'll offer this. You can see how this gets us in trouble too. That type of customer will offer it this way. Habits, heuristics, which we call rules of thumb, if this, then that. They're called cognitive shortcuts. We use shortcuts in our brains to make decisions. And because of those, we survive as a species, we survive as an organization, we survive as parents and in our careers. System 2 thinking, we don't have to do it as much, but we have to do it. And system 2 thinking means it's slow, it's orderly, it hurts because we have to collect data. We have to talk to a lot of other people to get other people's decisions. We have to concentrate. There might not be one right answer. Think about wicked problems. It's complex analyses. The problem is, even though we should be doing that in our organizations, in our lives, it's lazy. And so our brain says, yeah, I don't want to do that. I'm just going to go listen to the person who's talking the most. Yeah, I was going to say something, but I'm not going to say it. And so we defer to system 1 thinking. You as a team leader then need to design processes that help your team distinguish between system 1 and system 2 problems and have processes for dealing with each of these. Sometimes we can spend way too much time on system 1 problems that we should just put in a routine. We're wasting our time. Other times we're not spending nearly as much time as we should, making our difficult data-driven decisions. Here's an example of a system 1 thinking. If you drive and if you go on a highway on a fairly regular basis, you have probably had that situation where you're driving along the highway and you think, oh my gosh, I can't remember the last 4 minutes. It's frightening when that happens. And we think, oh, I so hope my mind, my instincts would have kicked in if there was an emergency. But it's scary. And it's scary because when we're on the road, we should be using system 2 thinking, but our mind often defers to system 1 thinking, the automatic. We all do. We all use system 1 thinking often when we shouldn't. That's your high-level overview of behavioral economics. Much more. There's much, much more to it. But for our purposes, and with decision management, this is useful. And so we need to use system 2 thinking. We need to have systematic processes for making decisions. We need to manage the decision-making process in our team because we are all, as human beings, from the same species, we are predictably irrational. But we think, I'm a rational decision maker. And so we say consciously that I just need to, if I do steps 1, 2, 3, I'll come up with a rational decision. But one of the analogy that's used, it's like you're riding this elephant and this elephant you think you're in charge, but your unconscious biases. This elephant is actually helping you, it's sending you in directions, some of them not good directions. So you say I'm a rational decision maker. Underneath the surface unconsciously, this elephant with all these unconscious biases says you wish. And these are just, I've listed a few here on this elephant. These are some of the most common biases that undermine team decision making. I'm just letting that sink in. We all do it. And there are ways to override each of these. which, again, we're doing the high level, but there are ways, systems, tools you can put in place that are lovely. They're fun to use, they're lovely. You can use them face-to-face, you can use them online, you can do them with Post-it notes, either virtual ones or real ones. Some of these processes are not hard, and yet they help you override these biases. So here is a frightening example. And maybe we have people here from Boeing, I don't know, or the airline industry. But many of us know about the Boeing 737 MAX. They had the 2 crashes, and let's see, Lion Air and Ethiopian Airlines, and I think it was a total of, it was well over 300 people. I don't know if that was just one or both together. But the issue there is people say, well, it was a technical problem with the planes. Usually what looks like a technical problem, it's a people or culture problem. And if it's a culture problem, it's a decision management problem. And there's several things that happen. So if you look at the investigation, one of the issues is it's so complex to make a plane. It's so complex to do surgery. It's so complex to do what most of you do. It's so complex to be an educator, educating a diverse group of people. It's so complex to be, I don't know, in the intelligence services, right? Intelligence agencies. Problems are complex. And in their complex, you have many different groups, silos, that are working on different parts of the problem. If you're not careful, right, this silo doesn't understand what this silo is doing. And even worse, this silo, when they talk to this silo, they talk to each other in language that the other silo doesn't understand. And think about this, when you go to a meeting and you don't understand someone, often, most people don't say, I don't understand. What we do is this. We nod our heads as if we understood for a variety of reasons. We don't want to take the time. We think we understand, but we don't. We don't want to look stupid. Everyone else, no one else is saying they don't understand. So we assume, okay, I guess this makes sense. I guess they're right. Never assume as a team leader at a meeting when people are doing this, that it means anything at all. You want to confirm that people understand each other. So here's what the investigation. So there were some technical problems, but people made decisions to put certain processes and mechanics in place at meetings after meeting after meeting after meeting. And these are smart people, so I'm not just pointing fingers at Boeing. I mean, there were some really bad, horrible decisions. I'm saying we all have to look at our own organizations and how we make decisions. So this is what, when they did the investigation, here's what the employees said. These are real quotes from emails, documents, conversations. Back before the planes crashed, would you put your family on a MAX simulator trained aircraft? I wouldn't. This one, they get increasingly horrifying. This airplane is designed by clowns who in turn are supervised by monkeys. Last one. Regarding a presentation that the company gave to the Federal Aviation Authority, that presentation was so complicated that for the agency officials and even the employee, they said it was like dogs watching TV, right? You're just doing this. So that's why decision management matters. And design overrides personality. And so you want to put a good decision-making process in place. You want to say, right now, at this program, what is your decision-making process like that you're using? What are you using now? And here's an example. Again, each slide has a lot more details, right? There are best practices, behaviors, models behind each of these. But just at the high level, an effective decision-making process has 4 parts. You need to frame the problem. Is this a people problem? Is it a technical problem? What is the problem that we're trying to solve? And let's get agreement on that. Then you need to go out and you have to get a lot of information. If it's a tame problem, the information's clear, you know where to go to get it, and everybody agrees. If it's a wicked problem, you're gonna have to talk to a lot of people who don't agree. And you're gonna have to get a lot of information and make decisions on missing information or ambiguous information or information that can be interpreted in different ways, right? So you frame the problem, you gather information, it's expansive. There are tools for each of these. You don't have to make this up. There are decades of research on tools for what works for each of these. Then you need to develop criteria for how you're going to make the decision. You need to agree on, I mean, I've heard of a technique recently, and I think it's some of my colleagues who are on here, an organization that I work with in South Africa, taught me about what's called the Moscow technique. It's beautiful. And I don't even know if I remember all of it now, but it's what are the must-haves? What are the should-haves? Maybe the could-haves, and what are the don't have it, won't have it, right? But what you must have versus what you should have versus these don't matter, or these would be bad if they were part of it. It's a technique. There are a lot of great techniques. There's something called a pew chart or decision matrix. Wonderful to use, also for personal decisions that you make as a family, or whether you're making airplanes. Fourth is you have to learn from the outcomes. If it's a complex problem, you are not going to get it right 100%. You have to keep learning. You're going to have to do pilots, right? You're going to have to figure out what went well, what didn't, and be ready. Your employees, your teams have to be ready to adjust. They can't get stuck in one way of doing it because tomorrow might be different. They might have forgotten a whole different group. They might have not thought of some unintended consequences. That is normal. You are not going to get perfection with wicked problems. You're going to get better. That's what you can go for. And here's just, it's nice to have some authority aside. Now, research university is an authority, but so are consulting firms and so are experts. They, McKinsey said when they trained people, right, to make better decisions, just as we do, you know, at Ross and other places do, when people were trained to make better decisions, they achieve returns up to 7 percentage points higher. Think of results. Making better decisions helps you get better results and achieve that vision that matters. Last one, and then we'll open it up for a few questions, is relationship builder. Right? Now that you've got the guardrails, within those guardrails, people have the freedom to work with each other and come up with innovative, creative ideas, support each other, help each other, develop themselves, develop others. Now we're in relationship building, influencing each other. Some of you have heard the term social capital, most of you haven't. Here's what it means. Social capital is a non-copyable competitive advantage for you in your career, for your team, for your organization. It helps communities and nations survive. Social capital matters. You've heard the language of financial capital. It matters. You know there's physical capital. There is, and this I just started using about 5 years ago, there's digital capital. Organizations that have more digital capital and employees who know how to use it at all levels and can stay on top of it, they have a clear advantage. Now, here's where you've got human capital, and I'm going to tell you the difference between human and social capital. Human capital, if you look at the picture, it's the people. It's the individual skills, talents, education, expertise that individuals bring to the organization. You say we want to hire talent. You're hiring individuals. Matters? That matters. Social capital is different. That is the relationships. You see in some countries it's a handshake. It could be 2 kisses, 3 kisses on the cheek. It could be a bow. Wherever you are, there's a way that you greet other people and build relationships. And when you see in this case the handshake, that is in that handshake and that relationship, that's what makes resources flow faster, better, more honestly, more supportively. You could have an organization full of talented people if they don't talk to each other, or if they don't like each other, if this silo never meets with this silo, bad things can happen, right? But if you build that social capital, those relationships, it's a non-copyable competitive advantage. No, people can copy each other's digital capital. You can copy physical capital. You're all, all of us are looking for a similar talent. We go to some of the same talent pools, but you cannot copy the relationships that are built across employees within and outside your organization. Quick. So I promised you, what's the number one thing that predicts high performing teams? Everything else I talked about will not matter. Or it won't matter as much, it'll matter. But without this, everything else I talked about won't be as powerful, and some might backfire. So here's where I'm going to ask John to put up a poll. Google did a study of what differentiated the highest performing teams and team leaders from the lowest performing. And the gap wasn't that big because their teams are good and they're talented. Of all of these, what do you think? You could, as many as you want. What significantly predicted team effectiveness? Many as you want. And we're going to stop it here. You might still, but we're just going to get a general sense of what we've got. If we could see the results so far. All right. Well, actually, they found out, here's your surprise answer. None of these. They were not as predictive as, we could close that now. I mean, those are all good guesses. We've learned that all of that matters. Those matter, but only if you have what's called psychological safety. If I have really good decision management processes, but people are afraid to speak up, they don't matter. And psychological safety is the research of Amy Edmondson. Many of you know about it. It's kind of it's more commonly known now as part of the language of organizations and high-performing teams and leadership. And what it means is, if I say something, will the team take me seriously? Do people like me? Do people respect people like me? This is my identity group, my race, gender, nationality, religion, part of the organization that I work in. Will people pay attention to me? If I make a mistake, think of complex problems, wicked problems. If I make a mistake, are people going to hold it against me? Or will we say, we've got to learn from this. This was an expensive mistake. We're not going to waste that learning. Is it safe to ask for help? If I don't understand something that someone else is saying, can I feel comfortable saying, can you explain what you mean like that? And if I ask, my guess is a lot of other people don't know either, because we all use acronyms. And when you work across different parts of the organization, you hear the ABC of the X2Y of the NYZ squared. We have our own language. We have to be clearer. That's called a sticky message. Clear messages are sticky messages. If you don't have psychological safety, the design of your team, your personality, the design of the context, it's not going to help much if people don't speak up, if people don't feel safe enough to take risks, especially in a volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous world full of wicked problems. People have to put their ideas out there so we can learn from them. That's the number one predictor of team success. Okay? So you've gotten, what you've gotten here is I'm going to ask you this in a minute, but you've gotten this model. But I want to ask this question because I've got one more slide after this. But before we get there, I'm going to give you the summary. And let's just, for the people here at this program, and so it's probably close to 700 people, have you ever felt psychologically unsafe at one of your team meetings at work? And John, if you could put up the poll. Yes, often, sometimes, rarely, never. Let's see what we've got. Okay, let's just see, John. I realize some people might still be thinking, what do we have? Okay, so think about the different types of organizations. Only 9% said no, never. More than half said at least yes, sometimes. 21% often. Think of the decisions that we're making at work, that you're making in organizations that serve the rest of us. All of us depend on you as a team leader helping your teams and team members feel psychological safety so that your team can make better decisions for us, for the world, whether it's plane crashes, emergency rooms, the products and services we use, how we educate our children, how we work in government, how we work across nations. I hope you're buying it, that psychological safety is absolutely essential. And there are ways that you can do that. You can increase psychological safety in part through design. So you have just received, in a very short period of time, what I hope is very, very useful to you. I hope you came out with at least one thing that you can use immediately. And I hope it really piqued your curiosity of what all the opportunities you have as a team leader to help your teams get better results. And the model, and I'll end on this, is you need to play all these roles. The order matters. All these matter all the time. But if you haven't created the vision yet for your team, got to do it. If you haven't if your team doesn't know what are the 3 to 5 measures for the whole organization, not just your department, that matter most so we can achieve that vision. Have you, for your department, your team or teams, have you put in the guardrails, data-driven processes, including decision-making processes that help keep us on track to achieve those results? And are you spending your time helping your team develop those relationships? You with your team with each other, and your teams with other people inside and outside the organization. And this is how you lead high-performing teams. We have a little bit of time here, if you'd like, for some questions, and we're going to be open a little bit longer for those of you who want to stay. I realize some of you need to run, but definitely stay in touch. If you have a question, get in touch with me. You can tell I enjoy this very much, and I'm happy to be helpful. Thank you.
We have a question from Praveen. How should a leader transform himself, herself to lead a cross-functional team and ensure one cohesive final output?
I would, and I say this with confidence, what I would say is I would advise you to invest in what we did here, designing the team. Because a really well-designed, or you can do the team at one team level, but you can do it across teams and the organization as a whole. I would focus on the materials that we covered. All the teams, cross-functional teams, do they have the same vision as well as their individual ones? Are they committed to it? Do they know why it matters? Do they all share the same commander's intent? They all know the bottom line results. Within that, they need to create their processes, and they have to be able to talk to each other in languages that they understand. I mean, it's something as simple as if you are leading cross-functional teams and you have a general team meeting and someone says something, you think, boy, I didn't understand that. I'd say, hey, I've been here 10 years and I didn't understand that. Can you explain for the rest of us in regular language what A, B, C, D to the squared means? I would be role modeling clear communication and psychological safety. I'd be spending time rewarding people for taking risks and saying things like, that's a good question. Hey, at that meeting when you did that really moved the team forward. And hey, that mistake, I know you might feel badly about it, but we all learned a lot from it. So I believe in my heart of hearts, and it's research-based, this material, I would learn the design, how to design the team using these 4 roles. Cross-functional teams, small team, same thing. Anybody else?
Oh, yes, of course. And so I see some people are raising their hands, but we do encourage everybody to type their questions into the Q&A. And to the next one from Jadson. What to do when we inherit a team with an inadequate culture, without collaboration, with many personal conflicts? How do we start? How long is it possible to reverse the culture?
Well, as far as how long it takes, it probably depends. I have heard, but this isn't going to help you, for a whole organizational culture. Let's say at General Motors, they had the ignition switch crisis several years ago to try to overhaul a whole organizational culture. It takes at least about 5 years. And that's if you do it really carefully. And you're still not going to get everybody, but at about 5 years. At a team level, I would say, just based on what the research I've read, I would say you can make real strides because you have more control over a team, your own area. I would say within a year, and you would have to start by trying to get people. You need to use your influence to get people on the same page and let people know one form of influence in a, I'm going to say dysfunctional, I'm going to use that term, in a dysfunctional team. One form of influence you could use, and if it's a cross-functional team, is you tell people what they'll lose if they don't get on the same page. You know, if here's why we do, I'm going with vision, here's why we do the work that we do. And here's some problems we've had. If we can't get this together, and we can, I wouldn't use the word can't because we can if we try. We need to get ourselves together here and work together, because if we don't, here's what's lost. And it doesn't mean you personally will lose your job. It's the greater good what will be lost. The time wasted, the bad decisions, maybe lives lost, bad education, bad opportunity, you know, opportunities lost. So I would put a lot of time, and a lot of time doesn't mean weeks. A lot of time means spend a week, spend a day going through this material and saying, what's the vision? What are the team's bottom line results that are non-negotiable? What guardrails do I put in place? And then I'd work a lot on relationships, psychological safety, connecting people. One thing we know for a team like that, for all teams, but for a challenging team, is you would need to use influence strategies. There's so much research on really, I'd say, sticky influence strategies. Because you understand the unconscious. If you understand how people make decisions unconsciously, you can use that information to frame your motivating statements in a way that's likely to get them to move and agree. And no easy answers to any of these questions. Anything else, John? I hope that helps.
Yes, thank you, Paula. Oh yeah, very much. And we still have over 200 people on the call, so people are really looking forward to these answers. So
200
moving
questions.
moving on to Darren. At what point in the process, if you are not successfully managing wicked problems and fundamentally the team is not working well together, do you consider you have the wrong team? Perhaps your process to choosing the team needs to be reviewed and possibly improved to increase chances of success.
These are all really good questions. With that one, what I would say is, yes, sometimes you can do all the right things and it really is the employer or the team. But until you've done the right things, you won't know. Unless you've really taken the time to design a context that can bring out the best in teams, until you've done these 4 roles, you don't know if the problem is you or the team or the organizational culture. I mean, a great case that we do sometimes is Mary Barra at General Motors. If this were a longer program, I gave you the Boeing example, and there's a lot more information to that. But for General Motors, the ignition switch, if you don't know that problem, that I think they had 15 years, and they knew there was a problem where if people were driving along the highway, you put your key in that's when we had keys, and I still do, in the car. You put your key in the car, and if you had a lot of other keys and things on your key ring, it'd be heavy. The ignition switch would turn off, your car would stall on a highway, and many people died. And many of the people who died were young people because it was in one of those compact little cars. And they also weren't experienced in driving. They had to change that organizational culture. And that's where they took steps to change the whole culture, to change the team, the team leadership. You could never say, gee, we have a bunch of horrible people at General Motors. They're wonderful people. There were about 15 people who ended up getting fired. People who just made bad decisions. They should have known better. But the rest of the people were regular people, kind of like you and me, trying to do our best, and the culture just got in the way. So if you take up all the people working on the ignition switch, they really identified about 15. It was very few. The issue was in the design of the culture. And they had to take steps to try to change the culture. And they still would have problems today, like any organization, but they did a lot of good work in a crisis. So fix yourself first, fix the design first, and then say, Are there some people here who still aren't going to get it?
Thank you. Kristen has a nice question that segues. After using the techniques you listed with strategy and design, how do you effectively manage the toxic employee or the one who does not permit others to have psychological safety?
Yeah. And again, that might be if, I'll go back to this question that I answered before. You have to look at yourself first. If that person is being toxic at a meeting and you're not stopping it, the problem is in large part you. Right? If you haven't really tried to stop it, you have to go back and say, okay, I've tried to stop this. I've designed team meetings so that one person can't dominate. We've been clear about the kind of comments that are and are not appropriate at meetings, and we hold people accountable. I mean, again, this is far too much than what we could do in this short program here. But I'd say first look at myself, I'd look at the design, and then it's a coaching issue. You know, is this person, and I know I forgot what it's called right now, but many of you use these already, where you have this, you assess every employee on, do they get results, right? Do they get results over here, high or low? And then do they represent the values of this organization? And then you can plot all the employees on both of those. It's talent management. You know, people use it for promotions. You plot them, and then that helps you at least identify what the issue is. Does this toxic person get results? If they don't do either, I think it's an easier answer. If you're able to, if they can't change themselves, then the answer is, yeah, they'll have to go. But some organizations can't do that. Some cultures can't do that. But then you at least identify, is the issue values or is the issue results? And then you get into legality. Some people get really great results, but their behavior brings everyone else down, or it's illegal. It's eventually going to bring the organization down or part of it. So I'd go through the steps. Is it me as the leader? Starts with me. Do I have processes that are supposed to manage these behaviors? Then I go into the individual coaching and I say results versus values. And then we do and we can spend half a day just on this kind of problem.
Yeah, and I think that does relate to some of the questions further down, but we could do a few more. So from an anonymous attendee, how do you motivate a financially rich employee who is not having much career growth expectations from the job?
She says the same thing, because I would go back to, I'm looking at that diagram. Does that person get results? If they're not getting results, I'd plot them. I'd plot people. Are they getting results, and are they upholding the values of this organization? If not, it's a coaching issue. If it's not a design issue, and we've been clear about what their performance metrics are, and they're not achieving them, then we do role plays in our programs, and we role play these, that could be a great role play. What would you do in that situation? And that has to do with individual motivation as well. What it is through coaching, you're trying to get in the other people's head, and they're trying to get in yours. And we're trying to develop a mutually supportive relationship. That the person would want to support you. You'd use your forms of influence. You'd use motivation strategy. The issue might be that they're not motivated, but the issue might be is they don't know how to do the work, and they feel stupid about that and don't know how to ask. It feels terrible not to be able to do your job. So there's so many things that could go into that. And our default might be, gee, they have a lot of money and they're not that motivated. It could be that. And then you've got organizations where family members get in there, right? Friends and family members. So it's not, the issue isn't money, it's nepotism.
Okay.
But if you've done all the other things, including design, it's coaching, it's development, it's interpersonal influence. And then your organization has to have a way of letting people go. As my colleague, Sherry Alexander would say, help them thrive elsewhere.
Okay, great. Well, yeah, let's do just a few more, and then we could let people get back to their days or evenings. So from Wael, is the same thinking and process applied to managing a family, especially with different ages of kids?
Oh, I love that. And we would talk about that if we were in a program. Yes, I mean, I've raised a family and they're now older, and you can see and John knows, John and I have worked together a lot. I just melt when I talk about, just melting. And yes, many of these can. One thing, in fact, my daughters are now 27 and 29, which is amazing to me. But I've told them one of the decision-making tools is called a decision matrix or Pew chart. I've taught it to them because they have to make decisions like, do I stay with this person or not? Do I move to this part of the country or not? Do I go for this promotion? Do I work virtually or in person? And a decision matrix is one in which you list all the criteria, and then you list your options. And at least, it doesn't give you the answer, but it helps you make better decisions, helps you be more systematic. So, we talk about this a lot. I don't like the language of work-life balance because life is never balanced, but we can craft a really good life. And we're the same species. Everything in leadership is based on problem solving. And we have problems in our regular lives as well as work. So,
Okay. Found one more here that was part of psychological safety and everything towards the end. So a little different question. How effective leader for my team when my direct supervisor does not create psychological safety for the whole unit?
Yeah, and that's where you can only, I don't know if it was Steve Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, but there's this idea, you have to figure out what you can control, right? We all have, well, most of us have bosses, unless you're an entrepreneur and it's your place, we have bosses. Some are wonderful, some not as much, but you have to figure out, given this model, and when you see me looking at the screen, I'm looking at the model in front of me, what do I have control over? Do I have control? If the organization isn't clear, if your boss isn't clear about what the vision is, you have a responsibility as a team leader to give your team one. And you put yourself in it. You say, look, if you're doing safety, service, whatever it is, education, you have to spend some time. You might spend it with your team. What is our vision? And that you have to hold on to something. You've got to give your team something to hold on to and work for. Right? If your organization doesn't have a clear vision, if your boss doesn't, you can put one in place for your team. It won't be perfect, mate, but it'll be better than not having one. You, for your team, if your boss isn't clear, have to be clear on the results that matter in the processes. For relationship building, and this is a fine line you walk, because you don't necessarily, unless the person's horrible, your boss might be a person just trying to do the best they can at the moment. We could always do better, right? So you don't want to just complain about your boss. I don't think that necessarily helps. But you can help people build relationships with each other. There's a lot of research on how to deal with difficult people and managing your boss. How do you manage your boss? So one is, it starts with you learning how to manage your boss. Then it's, how do you create the vision, bottom line results, processes, relationships, coaching for your team. And then you're doing workarounds. Unfortunately, that's the problem. One of the number one reasons people leave their jobs, it's their boss. It's their boss. And so you might have to help your team create workarounds. How do we work around the boss? And I mean, that's life. I'd like to say you can fix every person. You can't. You can't. Complexity.
Well, thank you. The person did reply that is very helpful.
Oh, so, good. Thank you.
Thank you, Paula. And I think with that, we will wrap up today's session. Thank you so much, Paula, for all of the wonderful insight and responses to the questions. And just a reminder to everyone else that this video will be posted to the website in a few days. And those that registered will also receive an email with a link to the presentation as well. So,
and I'll say, feel free to stay in touch. I mean, it's one of those, if I can be helpful, I'm happy to be helpful. We had such a short time together. But I wish you all the best, and I wish your teams the best. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Paula, and we look forward to seeing everyone next time.